Today's guest is all about opportunities, finding them and creating them. Let these stories of success help inspire you. Welcome to the Genealogy Professional Podcast, the resource for transitional and experienced genealogists who want to create a successful business. I'm your host, Miriam Pierre-Louis. Here you'll learn from professionals all around the world who work in the field of genealogy. Are you ready to get started? Then let's get going. Welcome to the Genealogy Professional Podcast. Today we head to New Zealand to get to know genealogist Fiona Brooker. Fiona, welcome to the Genealogy Professional Podcast.
Kia ora.
What's that?
That's a Maori greeting from New Zealand to say hello.
Hey, that's pretty cool. From what I understand, you started in genealogy with a letter from your grandmother. Tell us how that came about.
Sure. When I was at primary school, so primary school is our beginning school in New Zealand, we had a project to do something about our family history. It's the one I always wait for now when my children grow up to actually get to that same project. And so I asked my step-grandmother to find out about my granddad coming to New Zealand because he was my last ancestor to come to New Zealand when he came in 1924. He was actually born in Scotland, and she wrote me a letter. And so I still have that letter in my collection of papers. So I would have been about 7 when I first started. My grandparents lived in Wellington, which is in the North Island, so we really only saw them about once a year. And at that stage, phone calls were really expensive, so you didn't talk to them a lot. So it was I think it was a combined project to get me to write the letter as much as anything else.
So for them to come visit you, how long is the plane ride?
Nowadays it's about an hour to drive. You have to cross a ferry as well, so you've got a couple of hours on a ferry and then about a 4-hour drive.
All right, so you started in genealogy around the time that you were 7. And when did you start to get serious with your research?
I think it was a combination of that first letter, plus also my mother got interested in it. In the 1970s, a person from England wrote over to the minister at at the church on the west coast where my grandparents were in Hokitika, and asked to try and find a family connected to some letters. And those eventually came through to us. And what it was is that our ancestors that came from Devon had written a whole series of letters back to their family. And these letters still existed. And she had transcribed them by typing them out, word by word, and had sent copies of these to New Zealand. So I remember sitting at my grandparents' farm with my mum looking at these copies of these letters. And I think that first started it because it was like, well, who are these people and where do they fit? And my mum drew out a sketch of a family tree for me, another thing that I still have, and it's actually on my website, of her first family tree and my first sort of introduction to it. Getting more serious, it came about when I was at high school, and there was a night class at high school that allowed me to go off and do it. I had to get special permission as a student to be able to go to night class, and I did a 6-week course in family history, and then that was my first ever trip to the family history library at the Latter-day Saints Church. And from there, it just spun off.
Well, that's amazing that in high school you actually took a course for that. So this was like an adult education evening course kind of thing?
Yes, it was.
All right, so let's jump forward to when you went to the UK. I know you lived in the UK. What made you go to the United Kingdom?
I think for all Kiwis, we tend to go on what we call an OE, our overseas experience. And it's almost just something that's accepted and something that you are looking to do. My husband and I were probably a little bit older than the usual ones because normally what happens is you finish university and you go off for a great explore around the UK. We were a bit older. We'd married. We already had a house, but this was pre-children. So we went over there expecting to work to basically pay for our travel. And while I was over there, I had started going to things like the Society of Genealogists in London. We were living in London. And it was through that and through the other courses that I did, I found out about the Institute of Heraldic and Genealogical Studies. And they happened to have a 30-week night course going in London. And it was one of those things of, well, I'm here. I guess I can do this. I remember sludging through sort of slushy snow some nights after work to go to this course, and probably wandering around London with that whole vibe of nothing can ever happen to you. It's not a problem. Just wander anywhere you want. So it was great, and it was a really good experience to go and learn from others that are teaching, just having that experience to be able to go and learn, but also that it has a totally different perspective because obviously they're teaching mainly to an English market, and because this was in England as such. I remember there was one particular night where they're talking about the Commonwealth and different countries, and I'm watching them pronounce all these names from New Zealand, and it was like, this is going to be really good. So it was really fun to actually be there sitting there going, no, that's not quite how you pronounce that. Let's try that again.
What year was this that you were in London?
Yeah, this is 96, 97. Our last week in England before we came back to jobs and real life was the week that the Princess of Wales died. So it was a pretty monumental last week in London.
How did this course at the Institute of Heraldic and Genealogical Studies change the way that you viewed genealogy and how you would interact going forward with being a genealogist?
That's an interesting question. I haven't really thought about how did it change me. I guess it showed me how important education was. It made me even more determined to be involved in helping other people to learn about family history, and that spun off into the company as well. Before we went to England, I was already involved with the Society of Genealogists with one of the local branches. I've always been the youngest in the room for a lot of years, so it's quite nice to finally be catching up with some of my peers as such. So I've always been the one that has been involved, helping to organise things. So that's spun off by hearing what other people were teaching, looking at how education can happen. We had an institute in New Zealand called the Genealogical Research Institute of New Zealand that was around for quite a few years. However, it's now folded. Educational opportunities when you're in a country that's down at the bottom of the world are so important.
When you were in England, see, I can't quite leave England yet. I'm guessing that you were researching your own British roots while you were taking this course and living there.
Absolutely. We did a little bit of travelling around, probably not as much as what I expected to do. And you've got to balance it out. My husband was there. He's not a genealogist, so he can cope with so many churchyards and cemeteries. You have to balance that out. And we were there to have fun as well. But we did things like, I probably spent a couple of days in one particular churchyard in Devon where this family had come from that wrote the letters. Tried to catch up with some family members, but in those days, the internet was really only just becoming a thing as such. So it wasn't as easy to find people as it is now and catch up with people. So we did one huge tour around the UK. My mother came over to stay with us, and we did about 3 weeks around the UK and managed to go to some of the other places that the family came from as well. But it was probably in a later trip. It was nearly 20 years before I went back to the UK, and in 2014, I was lucky enough to go back with the step-grandmother that wrote me the letter and was able to catch up with more relatives then that I'd found. And that was my first chance at looking at these particular documents at the archives as well.
In the British Archives?
Yeah, in the National Archives. I'd already heard a story that my family had money in Chancery, was the family tale. And so these are Chancery rolls. They'd been indexed finally, and it's one of those magical finds when you suddenly go, oh, look, it's been indexed. I can get a copy of that. The first one cost me, I think, £40, which in New Zealand you basically double it. So it's $80, which probably about 60 American dollars these days. So it was, a sizable amount of money when you are looking at your disposable income. And so actually being able to go and look at the rest of these rolls, because there's about 10 of them in this particular collection, is fantastic. My friend had been there the previous year and had actually looked at them for me. And she said, you do know what you asked me to do. These Chancery rolls, they're huge. They come out of they're really dirty, and you have to roll them out on the table and then find your document that's in this big roll of documents.
Dirty but fun.
Dirty, yeah. It's definitely a black clothing day when you go to the archives to look at these.
You had your overseas experience. You went back to New Zealand. Your husband settles into whatever his career is. At this point, what do? Are you following genealogy, or are you focused on family at this point, or do you follow a different career?
Well, my background's actually in accountancy. So before I'd gone overseas, I'd been working for a department store in Christchurch called Ballantyne's. I had worked there all through high school on the shop floor. When I completed my degree, I moved into the office and had become the accountant. So when I went overseas, there was sort of a semi-expectation that I'd be coming back. So when I got back, I actually came back into effectively the next role up from the one I was doing as finance manager for the company. That was my full-time job as such. Alongside that, though, I got picked to be by someone looking for the treasurer for the New Zealand Society of Genealogists. So it didn't take long, and I was back in the fold of volunteering quite quickly. And if you've got any finance thing, you're very quickly picked of, yes, you'll be our treasurer. So I did 6 years as treasurer for the New Zealand Society of Genealogists. That means I was going to bi-monthly meetings, flying away for a weekend. We'd have a weekend meeting to discuss the management of the society as a whole. In that period of time, we opened a research centre up in Auckland as well, which is miles away from where I am, unfortunately. But I also managed to have 2 children in that time as well. So my children are very well travelled. They have sat through several council meetings for the society, being loved by the other people that were in the room with us, which was really good. Quite well organised in that I used to sit there and I'd breastfeed my children down the back of a meeting in the middle of the meeting.
So where did you have to go for this meeting? Is this on the other island?
It is. We actually moved around a bit. We would often be hosted by some of the branches for the New Zealand Society. The society is basically the only society in New Zealand. There is another group that runs independently, and they have a number of branches in the different localities around New Zealand. So often we'd be hosted by a branch for the weekend. We'd be billeted or we'd stay in a motel, and then they would host the meeting as such.
So I understand you were also at some point president of the society.
I was. I'd done the 6 years as treasurer and thought, right, I'm off. I'm off to do something different. And that's when I actually formed my company, registered it, it became a company. And then about a year later, I got rung up to say, oh, would you come back? And somehow I ended up as vice president, and then somehow ended up as president. So my company got sort of put aside as soon as it started.
Oh, geez. So what year was that you started your company?
The company started in 2009, so it's just over 10 years. When I had my second child, I had finally retired from that full-time work. I had done some other work in between. I had taken on a role doing some part-time teaching at Polytechnic, which is an adult teaching. So I was teaching in the business school in particular, teaching some accounting programs, some spreadsheeting, some Word. And while I was doing that, obviously full-time mum. And at the same time, I also studied a diploma in adult teaching. Took my education in a slightly different way for a period of time. Knew I wanted to start something, but wasn't quite sure what it was going to be, whether it was going to be genealogy or whether it was going to be more business orientated, but it was genealogy that it became.
You start your business and then the society reels you back in. Now, in the United States, the vice president's role is usually to do the programming. Is that the same in New Zealand?
No, the vice president's role is a lot less formal. It's just to be part of the council at that stage. It's a board now. It's just another member around the table. So there was a period of time where I stepped in as an acting president, and then for the next election, eventually stood as president. And so it was an elected post, president.
Did you increase or maintain the responsibilities that the president had?
During this time, it was a busy time. It probably took over my life to an extent, being president. It's interesting because I'm living down in Christchurch. The office and the people that are, there was a couple of part-time staff at that stage, are all up in Auckland. So I'm having daily phone conversations, multiple emails going back and forth with the office manager about the running. The board at the council at the stage was very management focused, so we were more helping manage the day-to-day as well. So it did take over my life. So when I did stand down, it was nice to get some time back to actually do some research of my own and to get back into getting the company off the ground. So as far as the society does, it has a number of services. It runs a bi-monthly magazine, so there's 6 issues of a magazine goes out. They have the library operating, which is a postal borrowing library. They have a range of services run by volunteers out of their own home. They have a range of collections that were being digitised and indexed so that they could be a revenue stream for the society. So there was lots of things happening, plus you've got the mechanics of branches that are out there running their own meetings, almost independent of the society, to see what they're doing.
So you actually had a physical office location?
We did. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
we when I was on for the first time as treasurer, we moved to having a library itself. So prior to that, as I say, it had been a postal borrowing library, but each section of the library lived in somebody else's house. So it was quite a big thing to bring it into a building and actually have a building that had both the library there and research area so people can go and use the Family Research Centre. It had offices, but it also has an education room as well.
So this would have been the main organization for people interested in genealogy all across New Zealand. So you would have had members across the whole country.
Absolutely.
Oh, interesting. In some ways, it's very similar to what we have, well, at least in my region of the country. And in other ways, it's very different. Like here in Massachusetts, where I am, we typically don't have libraries or physical buildings. We use spaces for other places. So that's interesting. You were involved in some conferences in Christchurch in 2008 and 2018. Tell us a little bit about that. And also tell us about the time difference. Is it just once every 10 years or that was just when you were participating?
Yeah, so the conferences were the New Zealand Society's conference.
Okay.
They were run annually at this stage. Again, they were hosted and run by groups of volunteers. So 2008, this was between my sessions on council as a councillor. The president at the time had said, we haven't got anyone volunteering to run the 2008 conference. Are you interested? Could you do something? And at that stage, they used to be run by individual branches. So in Christchurch, we have about 4 branches that are active. And I got representatives from each of those branches together and we ran and organised the 2008 conference. We invite international speakers, so we had international speakers come over. We had a range of domestic speakers as well, and it runs for 3 days with a AGM stuck in the middle there somewhere as well. So that was the 2008, and it sort of used to rotate around the country, so you'd have one in the South Island, then someone else in the North Island, about 2 in the North Island to 1 in the South Island, which is basically the population distribution around New Zealand. In between, they had started a new thing between the 2008 and the 2018 conferences where they started having a family history expo or family history fair. A little bit more like, I guess, Roots Tech to an extent, a lot more exhibition, probably less emphasis on the speaking. And so for a while there, they alternated between a fair and a conference. And so 2018 came around because it was the 50th anniversary. It was the end of the 50th anniversary for the society as a whole, but it was the 50th anniversary of the Canterbury branch being formed in Christchurch. Same thing again was that I sort of got shoulder tapped to say, could we organise it? And we did the same idea of pulling a really great committee together from out of the local branches. And again, we had a selection of international speakers, some from Australia, and those of us from the sort of the local area as well.
So you had some speakers from the United States and from the UK for that conference, or?
Yeah, so in 2008 we had Sharon De Bartolo-Carmack and Jim Warren came over and spoke for us. And in 2018 we had Janet Frew, we had Morris Gleeson from the UK. Helen Smith came over from Australia. Yeah, we're always open to anyone coming to visit us.
That's great.
And it sort of spun off to this year where I was involved in a tour called the DNA Discovery Tour, which had Blaine Bettinger and Angie Bush and Johnny Pearl, and had a whole different thing happen to it from being a physical conference where they were going to come and speak and run masterclasses and things like that, to a very quick turnaround to become a virtual conference.
Oh, so you did actually pull it off as a virtual conference?
We did. It was all basically the moment they were meant to be touching down in New Zealand is when our borders were closed. So we turned it around into virtual effectively overnight.
So you've had a lot of experience with some kind of really big events. Because when you're talking about bringing people internationally, that's a lot of organization.
Yeah, I guess it does come back to that education thing. You have to have these opportunities. And for us in New Zealand, if we want the opportunities, we have to make them happen.
All right, so your company is called Memories in Time. When you started that, you brought a lot of strengths to that company that you were just starting because you have all this background in accounting. You had the travel experience, the first-hand experience from studying and researching in London, and you probably had some other strengths that you brought to it as well. When you were forming that company, what did you think at that moment that you were going to offer as your services?
I think when I first started Memories in Time, there was two parts to it. I discovered this world of digital scrapbooking as well. So there was the family history. Obviously, that's my passion. That was always going to be part of it. I'd already been doing a few one-off clients outside of a company structure as such. So I knew that there was client work there, not necessarily a big market for it. But I had also discovered, as I say, this world of digital scrapbooking. I'd always looked at scrapbooking and thought, oh, that's really cool. I'd love to start that. But never thought the paper scrapbooking would work for me because of the fact that I would have this great big collection of paper and not want to cut it because I'm a bit of a perfectionist and it would really annoy me if I mucked it up. And so it would grow to be very similar to the great big pile of fabric that I have in the cupboard. So I'd stayed away from scrapbooking. And then I was looking for something to do after my mother died to be able to share some family recipes with my brother. And I thought, oh, there must be some way I can make these look pretty. And that's when I discovered digital scrapbooking. And I ended up on a site called Digital Scrapbook Place. It's since folded. But as it turned out, the head designer on that site was Lauren Devon, who is actually based in Auckland, New Zealand. So straight away we had that connection between us both being in New Zealand. So when the site was folding, I had actually managed by that stage to convert Lauren into being a family historian. So she was just starting to create some really great kits, perfect for scrapbooking and sharing your family history. So with that changing, I asked whether we could sell the kits through a website, and so that they'd still be available for people to share their stories and record their memories and things like that. And so because of that, I needed to get a website up. And so that's where that sort of started from.
So did you actually start your company more for the scrapbooking side?
I think they went hand in hand. They work really well together because when you're out, and we have an expo still in New Zealand that runs usually every year, and it's usually up in Auckland. And when you're a genealogist and you are at an expo, for example, you don't tend to have a lot of things that people can come and actually see and touch. If I want to talk about family history, sure, I can have my laptop there and I can help you with some of your family history and that sort of thing. But it's not exactly a particularly attractive thing to be able to show people. So the digital scrapbooking and the idea of being able to show people what they can then do with their research means that we can have fantastic displays of pretty things as such that people can look at and give them ideas on how they can share. So it sort of has run side by side. It's the attraction that makes people stop and talk to me at an expo.
And on the genealogy side, what are you offering services when you first started?
Have always been taking clients. The clients range from those that want me to do all of their research to corporate clients where I'll do probate, heir hunting type work. So it just ranges. It's always been there. Some of it's because of the fact that I'm in Christchurch and I can go and look at records here. So the record agent side of taking clients to helping people organise their material. I've sat down with clients and just helped them file.
So the people hiring you for the probate work, these are like heir research companies?
They are. That was one of those things. You know, in New Zealand we had a program called Heir Hunters on TV, and it featured a company in London. And so when I was going over in 2014, I just thought, I'll go and visit them and see if they need a researcher in New Zealand. And so that's continued on since. I think I surprised them.
That's pretty spunky of you. I like that.
You've got to take these moments. I actually think they miss out a little bit because I have the opportunity to do research while they're sleeping. So there could be more happening, but they'll catch on to that eventually.
Yeah, I really like that because you gave them the opportunity to meet you in person, whereas because you went over there and you decided to do that, if you had contacted them from New Zealand, there wouldn't have been that face-to-face connection that you were able to make.
Absolutely. And I remember him saying, oh, so, why did you come to see us? And I was just like, well, I was here. I'm making the most of being here.
That's great. I love that. Now, did you call them first or did you just turn up at their office?
I rang and made an appointment to talk to someone first, but that's definitely spun off into actually meeting with the managing director of the company. So it became something a little bit more than I even expected.
And is this typical of you? Are you generally like this when you trying to make things happen?
Absolutely. I will try and spin off anything from anything if I think it will happen. For example, last year or even the year before, Dana Leeds with the Leeds method. Fantastic method for sorting out your DNA matches and looking at that. She does it using a spreadsheet, which is absolutely how I would do it. But I looked at that with the people that I'm teaching and the people that I'm helping with their family history and thought a lot of them don't actually use spreadsheets. That's a big scary thing on a computer that accountants love and a lot of family historians didn't. So I transferred those into a printable form. And so I contacted Dana and said, are you happy for me to do this? I'm giving them away for free. I'm not charging anyone for them. I'm not making any money off your name and your method. And so since then, we've had quite a good friendship. Who knows what will come out of that and what we might end up doing together. But yeah, those forms are now on my website. I have blog posts about them. They're great for getting your colouring in pencils out and sorting out your DNA matches. So you look for opportunities and what else can happen and what else can we do from things. We're at the moment planning a Christchurch Family History Expo based off the Auckland Family History Expo that's been going for a few years. It's taken me a while to get the library. I've kept talking about it with them and get them involved. We've been, doing lots of different things.
I love that you're not afraid to connect with people. I think that relationships are so important and your business can just grow and blossom, just from a connection.
Absolutely. If you don't talk to people, you can't find out about things. You've got to put yourself out there and be out there creating opportunities as much as waiting for people to come to you. One of the things that I have started, and it's building, it's not there yet, is I run Your Place workshops. And it's looking at industries outside of the genealogy public and what they do. So Tupperware, for example, you will go and have a Tupperware party at your friend's house, look at all the Tupperware, enjoy being with your friends more than probably the Tupperware party. But at the same time, you have a bit of fun, maybe a glass of wine and things like that. So I've developed that into the Your Place Family History Workshop, where you can host me coming to your place and we'll sit down with a group of your friends and we'll talk family history, or we'll talk memory recording or DNA results, photo organisation, a variety of different things. And so it's small group mentoring. They pay the fee to have me come and actually present to them, and then it's one-on-one tuition during that time.
All right, so there's a speaker fee for the group thing, and then you're saying you follow up individually with people afterwards?
Yeah, a speaker fee for the group. So if there's 4 people in the group, they share the fee between them. If there's 5, they share the fee. It usually goes up to about 5, maybe 6. It really comes down to how much space there is around the kitchen table more than anything else. Often we'll end up sharing lunch together as well, or a morning tea break or something like that. It just depends on what they're wanting. I'll do a little bit of teaching in that as well, maybe what's new. So, yeah, opportunities come. So that's sort of the consulting on the one-on-one or one-on-small group. And then out of transferring DNA discovery to being an online event. And that was actually over effectively 2 weekends, because we'd planned to have it in Christchurch and planned to have it in Wellington. So we actually ran it live for the 2 weekends back to back. But that was organised by a lady called Michelle Patient, a genealogist in New Zealand. And because we were doing this and we'd spent so long talking to each other, in the last couple of weeks we've launched a group called Talking Family History. And at the moment it's a Friday night chat show, a little bit of teaching and a little bit of about half an hour of teaching in the middle of that. And because we're all in lockdown, there's an awful lot of talking at the moment as well, and chatting and just keeping up with each other and keeping the spirits up. It will change over time as we start to come out of these different things, and we're already discussing the background of what that's going to happen to that. But again, it was just an opportunity to take.
And is that broadcast, is that using Zoom, or how are you doing that?
Yeah, we're doing it using Zoom. We've done 3 now. So the first week I think we had 60 in the room, and the last couple of weeks it's been 90. We haven't actually gone out and advertised it. A lot of it's through word of mouth at the moment. We're not quite sure what we're going to do when we hit 100, because all of a sudden you really have some way of monetizing it, because the fees all of a sudden escalate quite quickly. So we're just looking at that and seeing what else we can do with it.
And are they recorded and then put somewhere else like YouTube or something afterwards?
That's one of the things that we're discussing. This was created very much on the fly out of the opportunity of the fact that we had paid for a Zoom subscription for the year. So now we're looking at how we're doing it. We did record last week's one. We're just trying to work out exactly how that all comes together now.
I met Michelle at RootsTech this year.
Oh, great.
I want to go back to these Your Place workshops.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you market those?
I haven't done a big push on them, mainly because I've been too busy. I've got a big major client that we're doing a whole lot of publishing work with at the moment, so that's taking up most of my time. So with the Your Place, what I'm looking at is I will start having slots that they can be booked and just working that through at the moment. I'm also looking at the moment, I'm just tossing up between doing that and doing some recording of some lectures. At Christmas time, before anything changed in the world, my big project for this year was actually going to be helping people to get research off their shelves and into books. And I started a Facebook group called Plan to Publish. And it has a monthly guide that I'm putting up on the website for free for people to download on sort of 12 steps to getting from your research to actually getting something printed and in the hands of your family by Christmas time. So that was meant to be the focus for this year. So things have been a little bit distracted in this last month, but hopefully we'll be back on target.
Now, I noticed that you are also a member of APG, the Association of Professional Genealogists. Being in New Zealand, what sort of benefit do you get out of being a member of that organization?
I think the biggest thing is being able to read the magazine and read the bulletin and just getting to mix with the minds of other genealogists to an extent. APG came out of being part of ProGen. I was in ProGen 33, so one of the last groups to do it over the 18 months.
Yeah, so how did that work from a time zone point of view? Where were the other people in your group from?
I think I'm the only New Zealander pretty much that's done ProGen. Everyone else was from the States. A lot of my selection of what I can do is based around what time is that going to be. I've just done Jill's certification discussion group, and again, it was selecting a group that would actually fit time-wise more than anything else.
You were able to actually get a ProGen group that you could talk to while you were awake and not at like 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
And so there might be 4 different subgroups that could have been chosen, and I usually only get to choose one. Often there'll be something like 2 o'clock in the afternoon or at lunchtime or something like that, which doesn't necessarily help when you are trying to actually work during the day. I try and keep relatively good office hours for when I'm in there and working at home. It would be nice to be able to do some of this education stuff after work, as such, like everyone, the majority of the Americans doing it are, but you don't have any choice.
So what does someone like you get out of a course like ProGen? Because you already have strong business skills, not only from your specific profession, in that you had a specific skill, accountancy, and then you also had experience in an office, and you also had a lot of experience with genealogy from both New Zealand and England. What did you get from ProGen that you didn't have before?
I think ProGen gave me the chance to see genealogy from other people's perspectives. What I find is because I do a lot of teaching in New Zealand, I'm often either being the teacher or I'm being an exhibitor in Expo. I very rarely get to go and be the student. And so I think that opportunity to be a student is so important. You've got to have a chance to learn. It's nice to see how people in a different country do it, as much as probably more formally done in America than research is done in New Zealand, in particular around citations and things like that. I think we're a little bit more relaxed around that, but it's good to mix and mingle and actually just talk to other people.
Were you ever caught off guard or just surprised by the way Americans approach genealogy just in a different way than New Zealanders do?
I don't know that I was surprised. I think I'd done probably enough reading around the sides and sort of Facebook groups and things like that to know how it was done, but it's good to see it in practice a lot more. The Genealogy Society that puts out the journal, it's a very relaxed, more magazine style. So it's not your formal articles with proper research, well, not proper research as such, but more formalized research and citation and all of that behind the research. So doing things like proof arguments is quite different to the way genealogy is done in New Zealand. I think we do it, but we just don't formalize it.
What's one thing that you learned from ProGen that you incorporated into your business?
Well, probably the best thing is actually sitting there and writing out your whole business plan and putting together a marketing plan. I've probably done it more by the seat of my pants and just gone with the flow than actually sit down and go, actually, this is what we want to do. It's rolled into, I have a good friend, Genealogy, who works with me sometimes and is now doing some part-time work for me as well. And we are now having like a yearly strategy plan on what we're going to do and what marketing gets associated with that, what events, what talks that might get written for the year, etc.
That segued perfect into my next topic, which was marketing. Yeah. What would be the primary way that you would do marketing? Is it from speaking and teaching or something else?
Speaking and teaching predominantly. I'm relatively active on Facebook in particular, a little bit started on Twitter, haven't quite got there yet. But yeah, teaching in particular, getting out there and actually giving talks, getting out beyond the usual genealogy groupies as well to give talks. So there's a number of Probus groups, friendship groups, University of the Third Age, Y3A groups that I have gone and given talks to. They usually are one of three. They're either a family history, a DNA, what's DNA all about, or a memory type talk. And it's good to go out and give those, and that then often leads into a client or two.
Did you find them or did they find you?
I found maybe one group, and then like a lot of things, they have almost like an organisation that runs behind the scenes that shares their speakers. Mm-hmm. And so I'll often get a ring and they'll go, I heard you gave a talk to this group. Can you come and give a talk to our group now?
So you use the term third age, right? So this is like education for seniors, for like retired people.
Absolutely. So these groups are retired in that older demographic. They're often a social group that will have someone come out and give a talk about a whole range of topics. And so I've just made sure that I've got 3 good standard talks that will go out and be applicable to them, to the audience.
And are those third age groups, we have a different term here, and unfortunately I'm forgetting what it is, but we have something similar to that. I only learned about it recently, like in the last year. Are those put on in association with universities or are they independent?
No, they're independent of the university system. They're just called University of the Third Age. They seem to be called U3A groups. And there's a range of different groups, and some of them are a little bit more formal. And I think it also, they range in whether they're a group that's almost grown up together as such or got older together as to how many younger members they've got coming through as well. So they're set up, they seem to have specific regions within the city that they cover and draw from that region.
Now, one thing I noticed that you did was you did some research. I think this is a radio station, More FM. A guy named Jason Gunn, who I'm guessing is a DJ.
He is a DJ.
But I would love to know, because he's sort of outside of the genealogy world, what was his reaction to your research? Was it your own kind of like, who do you think you are moment? What was it like?
Yeah, it very much was. This is something that got started by, again, me putting myself out there. The Christchurch City Council runs a heritage festival every year in October, and this particular year was going to have a family history theme. And so I had already thought about the idea of doing a who do you think you are type thing. And so I went to them and said, look, I'm thinking about this. Are you interested in being involved? And that then spun me into their marketing team, who then made the connection with Jason Gunn, who is a DJ on the radio and a TV presenter as well. And so I got to meet with Jason twice in this whole thing, once to start it off and once to basically present the research to him. And we're still going to do a little bit more from that. But it was fun to go out and do. And yeah, it spun off into blog posts. It was a 2-week marketing thing for the Heritage Festival. And so there was blog posts, there was the actual research itself, there was a couple of on-air discussions and interviews with some of the information that I found for him. In particular, it just fluked that I was looking at some military records for one of his ancestors, and it was exactly 100 years to the day that his ancestor had gone into battle as such. So that one actually went live on air with him talking about it on the national program for that radio station rather than just the local domestic program for that radio station.
So this was an ancestor who was in World War I or the Great War?
It was, yeah.
How do you call it in New Zealand?
We tend to call it World War One.
Okay, because I believe in Canada they call it the Great War. So
yeah, they do call it the Great War as well.
Yeah, interesting.
It was meant to be the war that ended all wars.
So was there anything in particular, where he was just like really surprised? Like, did he have a sense of where his ancestors were from or anything like that?
I think he had a little bit of information, probably more on his father's line than possibly on his mother's side of the family. He's a very family-orientated person, so this was right up his alley with finding out more.
Well, it sounds like it was a really fun project. All right, Fiona, the time has come for us to enter into the lightning round. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, great. What was the one thing you were most afraid of in starting your business?
I think like all people, it's finding those people that are actually going to pay you money to do what you really love doing.
What is the best advice you've received from someone else?
The latest one is that action, not perfection. So don't let the need to be perfect stand in your way of actually just doing what needs to be done.
What is one specific action listeners can take in the next 24 hours to help them transition into a genealogy career?
I think you've just got to go out there and look for what opportunities are out there. You just don't know what you can do until you see what others are doing as well.
Can you be a little bit more specific? So for somebody who says, I want to get into genealogy, but she says, go look for opportunities. Where on earth do I look for opportunities? Where would you send them to look for opportunities?
I would see what's happening in your local community. Are there projects that perhaps you can get involved in? One of the big projects in New Zealand, we have war memorials, for example, and people started researching those soldiers that were on the war memorials. So look and see what groups are already existing. Get involved in those groups. The volunteering part turned into the teaching part turned into the taking clients part. So you need to sort of be out there and helping as well.
If you can recommend one book for our listeners, what would it be?
There's lots of books that I've heard people talk about before, so I didn't want to pick one of those. So I've picked Bringing Your Family History to Life Through Social History by Catherine Scott-Sturtevant. It runs with that whole idea of actually looking beyond the records and looking at what helped to create those records, recording stories, recording memories, which I just think is so important. One thing I've always discussed on my website is if I could go and get a photo of my grandmother's kitchen, I would absolutely be overjoyed by that. So making sure that we're doing the same thing, taking photos of our kitchens now so that our grandchildren, our descendants can see what our kitchen looked like.
I like that. Give our audience one parting piece of advice and then tell us how we can get in contact with you.
I think the biggest piece of advice I can give is you reap what you sow. Get out there, as I say, be involved in your groups, but also get out there and do things like transcribing records. I live in a little country down the bottom end of the world. Most of our people came to New Zealand in the 1840s onwards from the UK. I can't help out in the UK to get those records transcribed, but I can help out from here in New Zealand to transcribe records, to make those available for people that are suddenly discovering they have New Zealand cousins through their DNA. So get out there and help. Love to talk to people, so you can find me and contact me through my website, memoriesandtime.co.nz. We're on Facebook and Twitter as well, and we have a Pinterest page hiding in there as well.
Fiona Brooker, thank you so much for being on the Genealogy Professional Podcast.
Hey, thanks, Marion.
I think the theme of today's episode is finding and identifying opportunities. Right from the start, when Fiona was doing her overseas experience, she created an opportunity for herself by taking advantage of a 30-week genealogy course. Later on with her business, she took the initiative to introduce herself to an air research company and to reach out to a genetic genealogy colleague. Did you hear how she, in order to promote an event, contacted a radio station and provided a genealogy experience for the DJ? That really got me thinking. In the past, when I did publicity for a conference, I arranged for bloggers to interview well-known genealogists speaking at the conference. If I could do that over today, I would do what Fiona did and contact someone in the local media. There were certainly lots of nuggets to think about in this episode. For news items this week, if you want to connect with me, join me on Facebook in the TGP Action Group. You can comment, share your expertise, and ask questions. That's the place to find me. Search for the TGP Action Group on Facebook or find the URL in the show notes. If you're not on Facebook, follow the Genealogy Professional on LinkedIn. You can get new episode notices there. Go to LinkedIn and search for the Genealogy Professional and hit the follow button. And of course, don't forget, you can now find the Genealogy Professional podcast on Spotify and YouTube. Today's action item comes straight from Fiona's lightning round suggestion. If you're looking for opportunities, look right in your local community. What opportunities are there that you can get involved with? Are any local groups doing projects that could use your research expertise? Perhaps research into soldiers of past wars? Or perhaps researching the town founders in the local cemetery? Use these opportunities to start building networks and to spread the word about your services and expertise. That's it for this time. Until we meet again, keep improving your business skills and take at least one step to push your business forward. The Genealogy Professional Podcast is a production of Fieldstone Common Media. Copyright 2020. Executive producer, Marion Pierre-Louis. Creative producer, George Edwards. Technical director, Jean-Luc Pierre-Louis Jr.